And we are up and running. It is a kind of mellow day here in the Heartland region. I'm in the Chicago area. 45 degrees and misty, cloudy, foggy in post-apocalyptic America, the week after the inauguration. So this is an interesting place for us to start off on section 2 of looking at that deep image of the guiltless world, getting back to a place where we can see the guiltlessness of the Son of God. Boy, is that ever right in everybody's face right now. How are you this morning, Stephen?
I'm doing really well, Chris. Thanks for asking. Today we have a snow day, so kids did not have school today, and we are all enjoying time off. I didn't have work today either, so I get to keep doing these videos, which is a good pleasure for me.
Yes, it is needful, I think, for both of us. And if you guys are experiencing a snow day, then this is a good day for soup or stew. Making a big pot of stew would be fun.
The crock pot sounds good for that.
There you go. That works.
Mm-hmm.
Well, jumping right into it here, the guiltless Son of God, starting off with this first paragraph. We start off with this idea: the ultimate purpose of projection is always to get rid of guilt. Mm-hmm. Yet characteristically, the ego attempts to get rid of guilt from its viewpoint only. For much as the ego wants to retain guilt, you find it intolerable, since guilt stands in the way of your remembering God, whose pull is so strong that you cannot resist it. Then the deepest split of all occurs. For if you are to retain guilt, as the ego insists, you cannot be you. Only by persuading you that it is you could the ego possibly induce you to project guilt and thereby keep it in your mind. So we're looking at that investment we all have in retaining our guilt against our desire to be free of guilt, and watching it play out on a global level as everybody is attacking and pointing fingers and looking at what is politically palatable and what has become a political nightmare. So, wow, we're living right in the midst of the course, aren't we, Stephen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the symbolism is everywhere, and we can start to open our eyes to see it. It's like Carl Jung said, synchronicity is a ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. But what's really striking to me is when hearing the lines from the Course that you just read is how simple it is, how obvious that truth is, and yet it kind of hits this chord inside where we go, really? Like, I have an investment in guilt, and that's pretty much what it's saying, is that the ego is persuading us to invest more in guilt by projecting it onto others. And it's kind of like this really unconscious belief we have that we're guilty, and we're not. Like, I think that we don't really think too much about it until someone brings it to our attention.
That's very true, and that's what Mr. Trump has done. He has brought it right up and crystallized it right in front of us, and for this we should be grateful, because now we can do the real work, which is addressing this by recognizing that all of the things that we are afraid of right now, all of our investments in self-protection, are going to start to have to be reviewed, and reviewed in a huge way, because we are moving into an era here, it appears, where a lot of people are going to be feeling like their rights, their civil rights, their social rights, their rights to produce and create are coming under threat. And really, it's a much deeper story than that, because we have given our rights over to the ego, and the ego is having a field day, causing us to have to stop and correct our vision.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's not always easy to look at everything we've made here in this earth realm. But nevertheless, I think that the solution always comes back to reclaiming our power and basically admitting to the fact that we are the ones with power here. We are the co-creators here in this realm. And whatever it is that we individually see in our lives, we can just go ahead and look to ourselves for the writer of the story.
That's accurate. Yes, that's definitely true. And one of the things that we have to be very sensitive to is that the story is designed to keep us asleep. And so it becomes more divisive and compelling. We get sucked into it so very, very easily. And I think this is a very important part of, really starting to comprehend what the Course is telling us. If you are out there and a political activist, and yet you still imagine yourself to be invested in A Course in Miracles, you're at some point going to have to really look at that in a much deeper level, because there is something going on, and it is very profound, and it is very, very empowered. And as you were saying, we can embrace our power at this point and start to awaken even more rapidly. The truth is, embracing our power is surrendering ourselves to God and allowing the Holy Spirit to direct us, rather than responding from the level of the ego and imagining that we can go out and protest and call senators and congressmen and make our voice known, when really our voice is just a reflection of the ego on that level of life experience. So these are challenging times, I think, for anybody who's into A Course in Miracles, because there is that first immediate response to, hell no, I'm not going to take this anymore. And, throwing up your window and screaming out into the darkness of night that, you're filled with angst and you're going to stop it. And of course,
rage against the dying of the light.
Yes, exactly. That there was a great movie back in the 70s where, the litany was, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Well, here we are at 2017, and the same litany is being yelled out across the land. So this is making A Course in Miracles much, much, much more tangible and visceral. And it is the thing that is going to drive us back into the arms of mercy, not just for ourselves, but extending that mercy to everybody on the planet.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think it's really beautiful how A Course in Miracles doesn't oppose, it doesn't negate, it doesn't say that anyone is wrong. It just simply and as plainly as possible gives us the truth. And I think that the more that I've read it, the more that I'm experiencing it, the more I'm realizing that the Holy Spirit is so gentle. It just so much wants to just go in and basically gently lead us to the truth, gently blend, offer up our experiences to the truth so that we can very softly come home. I mean, sometimes the things we look at aren't too pretty. Sometimes they're rough. Sometimes it's challenging to view those things. But overall, I don't think we're ever called to put ourselves through the shredder or do anything that would be hard on us in an, in an actual soul viewpoint. Does that make sense?
That very much makes sense, because we are told in the Course that while Jesus made that ultimate experience on our behalf of confronting death through a very grisly and hideous process, but then rising above it, resurrecting the body and saying, see, you're not dead, I'm not dead, nobody's died. So that makes it it's kind of scary when you first start thinking about, well, at some point I'm going to have this process of crucifixion and resurrection myself. But Jesus, in the text in the Course, assures us that we will never be presented with things that we can't handle. And everything is being orchestrated on our behalf from a much higher vantage point. So there, again, it becomes an act of trust. And I think that's really the central theme of 2017 is, even though it appears that, the ship has been overrun by pirates and is on course to hit the iceberg, we have got to step back and invest in trust on the highest level in order to negotiate our way through these times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that ability to trust can really help when we seem to be free falling, when we feel like we're free falling and there's no sense of certainty, there's no sense of groundedness at times. We just feel like we're kind of falling to our destination. And I think that trusting that we're always going to arrive, that we're actually already arrived. It's already guaranteed. It is already certain that we are in heaven with God, that we're not, that there's no chance of actually failing about
right.
it in terms of coming home.
Yes, there was never a sacrifice made. It was only the releasing of that desire to play with all the toys that the ego offers us in order for us to get comfortable with the idea of death. And death is not even a concept in the mind of God. So it's kind of ironic how we put so much interest and investment into allowing ourselves to be seduced into that state of realization, which is the realization of nothingness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in such a clever way, the ego has made nothingness seem appealing to us in the first place. So I'm so grateful for A Course in Miracles and the way that, like, I think a common question that people have when they read the Course is, why does the Course talk so much about the ego and about all the ego's mechanisms? Well, it's because the ego is really the only thing in our way to the awareness of God. So if we can look at all the ego's patterns and identify them, then we'll no longer be so tricked by the ego.
Exactly. And we do have to acknowledge the fact that there's only one ego, just as there is only one child of God. So even though you think that you are yourself, that is a collective thought, and it is spread over 7+ billion people scattered around the planet. Who knows how many other planets and how many other galaxies across the multiple universes that appear to be expanding out in front of us.
All with their own senses of personal identity.
Right. So you want to move forward with paragraph 2?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it says, yet consider how strange a solution the ego's arrangement is. You project guilt to get rid of it, but you are actually merely concealing it. You do experience the guilt, but you have no idea why. On the contrary, you associate it with a weird assortment of ego ideals, which the ego claims you have failed. Yet you have no idea you are failing the Son of God by seeing him as guilty. Believing you are no longer you, you do not realize that you are failing yourself.
Well,
Anything?
that puts a very strong emphasis on the idea when we look at that statement. You are actually merely concealing it.
Mm,
And that is highlighting the idea of the split mind once again. What we've done is we have created the conscious and the subconscious realms, and all of our fears and all of our sorrows and all of our guilt is deeply buried in that subconscious region. And of course, the real journey is to be able to heal that rift between the conscious and the subconscious so that everything comes to the surface and is allowed to be dismissed through divine intervention, through turning it over and surrendering it to God.
Absolutely. I think that it's interesting that when these texts are speaking so directly to me, to us, whoever the reader is, and it's really profound when I actually take the words in and consider, wow, that is actually what I'm doing. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. But sometimes, like, we don't even recognize that any of this is taking place until we get our hands on A Course in Miracles, or we have some sort of realization in life.
That's accurate. And that's why one of my litanies that I keep babbling over and over again is that the Course in Miracles is a very personal experience, and you have to read the book with that mindset of this is personal. It was written, directly to me. This was not written for billions of others. This was written directly to enter me and to assist me in my own awakening, in my own transformation.
Yeah, and something someone said too, A Course in Miracles teacher said, it's actually from your future self. You know, you could think of it that way, like Jesus is like your future self in a way, because really he's just saying that you're gonna do all of this. I know that you are, because you already have.
Right.
Because he's looking from that timeless space.
We're living that residual memory. It's Groundhog Day just over and over and over again ad nauseum. So, it's like, well, time to kill the freaking groundhog and get further down the road here.
Yeah. I'm laughing because the realization of that, when it kicks in, we just like can't help to laugh at my own insanity, and sometimes that's the best response to have towards it.
Oh, I think you're accurate there. I think that would be the best way to deal with it, is to recognize how absurd all of these machinations are, and to be able to release them without any attachment whatsoever. That's really the balm of Gilead. There was an old song about the balm of Gilead, and crossing that river and arriving at a place where you have been cleansed and released from the past.
Wouldn't that be nice? Want to read the third paragraph?
Yes, up here in the third paragraph, we have the darkest of your hidden cornerstones holds your belief in guilt from your awareness. For in that dark and secret place is the realization that you have betrayed God's Son by condemning him to death. And that's what we come back to over and over again. A lot of religious orders talk about original sin, and that is the original imagined sin, that we could kill God's Son, that we could become separate from God and murder God's Son. So in a lot of ways, the collective is feeling that guilt for the crucifixion of Jesus, as well as for the murder of everybody else who's been murdered in that span of time from the dawn of this material realm. So that's very profound, and at the same time very terrifying when you stop and really look at it. Do I really believe somewhere in the depths of my soul that I was there and drove nails through the hands of Jesus? And somewhere buried down there at the bottom of it all, there is that source of guilt that we have to be willing to address. It goes on to say, you do not even suspect this murderous but insane idea he's hidden there. For the ego's destructive urge is so intense that nothing short of the crucifixion of God's Son can ultimately satisfy it. It does not know who the Son of God is because it is blind. Perceive guiltlessness anywhere, and it will try to destroy it because it is afraid. So that really targets the source of our misery.
Yeah, that's when it starts to become very clear for me, because I think that until I found A Course in Miracles and started pontificating its ideas, I always thought the ego was more afraid of darker things. I thought the ego was afraid, I'm afraid of dying, or afraid of losing, or afraid of things in the earth experience. But the truth is that the ego is most afraid of light. It's most afraid of love, most afraid of guiltlessness. And that's a really profound realization to have, because I think that that's the insane urge that the ego has to destroy what God has created.
Yes, that is the motivation for all of our madness.
Right.
So you want to move forward with paragraph 4, because it definitely ties in directly to what you had just stated.
Much of the ego's strange behavior is directly attributable to its definition of guilt. To the ego, the guiltless are guilty. Those who do not attack are its enemies, because by not valuing its interpretation of salvation, they are in an excellent position to let it go. They have approached the darkest and deepest cornerstone in the ego's foundation. And while the ego can withstand your raising all else to question, it guards this one secret with its life. For its existence depends on keeping this secret. So it is this secret that we must look upon, for the ego cannot protect you against truth, and in its presence the ego is dispelled.
So guilt is the best tool that the ego has to keep us under its spell.
Yeah, and its definition, the ego's definition, is always totally opposite to whatever the truth is. So if the truth is that you're innocent and pure and created by God, then the ego always wants to twist that to a 180-degree opposite, that you're guilty and you weren't created by God and you're not worthy.
Yeah, and the ego goes about that by projecting it onto others. So all of a sudden, we have Mr. Trump as our president, and all of this darkness is what a lot of people who imagine themselves to be, healers and light workers and yada, 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 they get right in the middle of that mud hole and start slinging this darkness out and projecting it onto the people around us. And that's why we have to pull ourselves back over and over and over again and keep saying, this is not real. This is a dream. This is an illusion. Yes, there's a lot of emotional charges around it. A lot of people appear to be being hurt. But the truth is, at some point, we will awaken and we will step out of this and realize its nothingness.
Yeah, I think that this section too is that, because the last section we did is called Guiltlessness and Invulnerability, linking the two together. So we can always hold that in the back of our mind, that because we're guiltless, that also means in that identity of ourselves, we are invulnerable. So we can't actually be hurt in a permanent sense. We can feel hurt in a physical sense or emotionally, but not in our true self.
Absolutely. Yes, our true self is residing in that euphoria that is God. And, you know, if we're not experiencing even glimpses of that kind of euphoria, then we're really not paying attention to what God is trying to present to us in this journey of awakening. So in paragraph 5, it says, in the calm light of truth, let us recognize that you believe you have crucified God's Son. You have not admitted to this terrible secret because you would still wish to crucify him if you could find him. Yet the wish has hidden him from you because it is very fearful, and so you are afraid to find him. You have handled this wish to kill yourself by not knowing who you are and identifying with something else. You have projected guilt blindly and indiscriminately, but you have not uncovered its source. For the ego does want to kill you, and if you identify with it, you must believe its goal is yours. So here we do a complete turnaround, and suddenly it hits us in the face that the person that we want to kill is in fact ourself. And that's where the mystery begins to unravel. That's where the truth begins to become visible, and we can actually step into that next stage of saying, you know, no, I don't want to kill myself.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really profound take on things, and it really kind of makes me reminisce about my Catholic upbringing and how, you know, when we went to church and we heard so much about original sin and about how Jesus was crucified and watched the process of that. We would have to do like the Stations of the Cross and hear over and over like the way that Jesus was crucified, the way that he was whipped and killed and all that, along with the resurrection portion. But I remember just the feeling of the guilt that was associated with it from the very beginning, the feeling of like, why is this striking such a chord? Why is this so difficult to stomach? And why is it so important? And my take on it now is that for this lifetime, I must have, you know, signed up to, you know, look at that piece again and really start to understand like why that was so important to look at and bring into my experience.
Right.
Do you understand?
Because ultimately it loops back into that recognition that you are one with Jesus, which is the Christ. And so when you're standing outside of that state of being, then you have created a sense of aloneness. You have never been able to actually be alone, but you have created a sense of that, and that's going to make you a very frustrated and unhappy person. Yeah. So you want to move forward with verse 6 here?
Yeah. I have said that the crucifixion is the symbol of the ego. When it was confronted with the real guiltlessness of God's Son, it did attempt to kill him. And the reason it gave was that guiltlessness is blasphemous to God. To the ego is God, and guiltlessness must be interpreted as the final guilt that fully justifies murder. You do not yet understand that any fear you may experience in connection with this course stems ultimately from this interpretation. But if you will consider your reactions to it, you will become increasingly convinced that this is so. And I can definitely vouch for that experience within myself from having read the course.
Yes, and having spent time learning how to listen. You know, I think that's what the course really is a journey to being able to calm the mind enough to be able to hear the reassurance that Jesus offers us. Because, you know, when the resurrection occurred, the first thing that he did was present himself to his apostles and allow young Thomas, the doubter of the group, to actually touch the wounds and make it very real to these young men and to the rest of that civilization that, yeah, you pounded up the body pretty good, but the truth is you really didn't hurt me, who is you, who is us, who is one, because the Christ cannot be touched. So it does get very, very deep at this point as we're looking at this idea of stepping into guiltlessness.
And now if I could really imagine myself in that same room with the apostles and Jesus when he was offering them to touch his wounds, I can really feel it as though that's happening right here, and as though, you know, that's never left. It's like this experience that, you know, nothing's ever changed. We're still totally guiltless and vulnerable. And then there's this, whenever there's that lingering sense of guilt inside that we really did kill the Christ, we really did kill him, that's the insanity, right?
Yes. And it spirals us into, you know, all these embellishments, because really everything that's going on in this world is a divertment away from, you know, looking at truth. And so if you're attracted to that, you know, beautiful blonde down at the end of the street, or that beautiful Lamborghini sitting in the neighbor's driveway, or that big house on top of the hill, or the
bunch of money.
Yes, and acknowledgement, you know, appearing to the masses of the world as their savior. Our little egos really love those images and that vision of truth. And so if you get hooked into any of those pursuits, then you're playing the game from the ego's vantage point, and it'll probably be a rough ride for a while until you start to reconsider those ideas.
Yeah, and I really love how the passages we're reading remind us that whenever we're idolizing something like, you know, like a new Lamborghini or any of the things you mentioned, it's not really the thing itself, but it's that feeling of we're trying to have it for the feeling we think it's going to give us. And if we're seeking externally for a feeling that it can give us, that means we've forgotten our source and, you know, our own fountain within us that should give us all the happy, overflowing, joyous, peaceful, all the loving feelings we could ever want.
That is very on point, as is reiterated in verse 7. It says, there you go. Go ahead and rock with that.
This course has explicitly stated that its goal for you is happiness and peace. I love how they all tie together for our dialogue. Yep. Yet you are afraid of it. You have been told again and again that it will set you free. Yet you sometimes react as if it is trying to imprison you. You often dismiss it more readily than you dismiss the ego's thought system. To some extent, then, you must believe that by not learning the course, you are protecting yourself. And you do not realize that it is only your guiltlessness that can protect you.
And your guiltlessness is stepping back and surrendering and residing in the Christ.
So, should we go on to the next one?
Yeah, we'll finish up number 8 here. It says, the atonement has always been interpreted as the release from guilt. And this is correct if it is understood. Yet even when I interpret it for you, you may reject it and do not accept it for yourself. You have perhaps recognized the futility of the ego and its offerings, but though you do not want them, you may not yet look upon the alternative with gladness. In the extreme, you are afraid of redemption and you believe it will kill you. Make no mistake about the depth of this fear. For you believe that in the presence of truth, you might turn on yourself and destroy yourself. And that definitely holds true, I think, for 99% of the population, as there's this realm that was defined in psychology as the id. And the id is that murderous part of the human experience from which, all destruction and all sacrifice is spewed forth from. So
the desire to kill and be killed.
Yes, right. Yeah, it is a very, very dark thing. And if you want to see it projected from the silver screen back in the 1950s, rent Forbidden Planet, and you'll see it synopsisized in a very Shakespearean form, but it's worth looking at because that movie does have some very deep and profound thoughts in it.
And you could also just look around the planet for a few seconds and notice the way that most things work here too. I mean, in nature, everything feeds on itself. Everything feeds on something else. I mean, even plants, they feed on minerals and water and sunlight. So, I mean, everything requires something else in order to keep going in this realm.
Yes, and ultimately that consumption is reduced to that simple and banal realm of death. In order to live, you have to kill something and consume it. And anybody who thinks that God would create that and offer it as a gift to his beloved child obviously has been listening to the ego way, way, way too much.
Right, because that's where that comes from when there are a lot of arguments against God and why God created this world if he's all good, all benevolent. Then I mean the answer is he didn't. So it's all set.
Yep, this is our magic mystery ride. So,
right.
Well, to finish this section up.
Yeah. Little child, this is not so. Your guilty secret is nothing. And if you will but bring it to the light will dispel it. And then no dark cloud will remain between you and the remembrance of your father. For you will remember his guiltless son, who did not die because he is immortal. And you will see that you were redeemed with him and have never been separated from him. In this understanding lies your remembering, for it is the recognition of love without fear. There will be great joy in heaven on your homecoming, and the joy will be yours. For the redeemed Son of Man is the guiltless Son of God, and to recognize him is your redemption.
That whole section definitely is very apropos for our current times, but of course that could probably be stated for all of human history, but nonetheless, we are at a place here where just looking around us, the Course is becoming more and more meaningful, more and more powerful, and more a source of solace in a very, very frightening universe that appears to be very real.
Yeah, so I guess all we can really say for ending off, wrapping up with this section is to keep this in the back of our minds and to keep on raising whatever we seem to be experiencing in this world up to that truth, to keep remembering our innocence, keep remembering our guiltlessness, and reinsuring that like every time that we feel like we're guilty or that other people are guilty.
Very true. And invoking the Holy Spirit. A lot of times you feel overwhelmed by this stuff, and you need that little assist. And all you need to do is just call upon the Holy Spirit and say, "Oh, this has gotten ugly. I want to turn this over to you because I know I can't fix it." And you will begin to get that sense of being at peace if you do that consistently. Every time you're faced with something that is fearful or ugly or horrific or whatever. So it's not a journey where you are stuck out in the wilderness on your own. You do have the resource and unimaginable power but it comes not as a, charging into the world with guns and knives and all that sort of thing. It is a backing away from the personal self and entrenching yourself in that higher sense of identity in the Christ within.
Yeah, the stronger we become rooted in that, then to be a lot easier to be unswayed by things here.
Very true. Well, Stephen, in 1 week we will be looking at section 3, the fear of redemption. That could be another huge step forward in realizations. So we invite everybody who is enjoying our discussions here to join us in a week, and we will look more deeply into that level of awakening.
Yeah, and also we'll just sit with this for a week and let that brew and let that reinstate in our minds that sense of truth, and then next week we'll address our fear of redemption.
Sounds perfect.
Okay.
Well, Stephen, enjoy your winter excursion there with a snow day in sunny California, and I'll chat with you in a week.
Okay, Chris, you enjoy your week too. Talk to you then.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye.